The massive doors of the Galactic Council chamber slid open with a deep hum. Ambassador Kang Minho walked through them with steady steps, his black diplomatic uniform pressed and clean. Behind him, Kim Nari followed quietly. Her military dress. Uniform showed no weapons, but her sharp eyes watched everything around them. The chamber was huge. It could hold thousands of beings, and today, it was full. Alien delegates from across the galaxy sat in curved rows that rose up like a giant bowl. At the center sat the High Council, 12 of the most powerful species in known space. Minho had been in this room many times before. Each visit had been the same. The aliens would listen to human requests with bored faces. Then they would find reasons to say no. Today felt different, though. Today was humanity's last chance. The Vellani High Counselor, Veltar, sat in the center chair. His blue skin seemed to glow under the chamber lights. His large black eyes looked down at Minho like he was studying an interesting insect. To his right sat Korhan of the Koreth. The warrior alien's red scales covered thick muscles, and 4 arms crossed over his broad chest. On the left was Thaxmor, the Thaxian trademaster. His green tentacles moved constantly as he calculated profits in his head. "The human delegation may speak," Veltar said. His voice carried easily through the chamber without amplification. Vellani voices were naturally loud and clear. Minho stepped to the center of the speaking area. A bright light shone down on him. Every eye in the chamber focused on the human ambassador. He had given speeches here before, but never one this important. "Honored members of the Galactic Council," Minho began. His voice was calm and strong. "Humanity has served this galaxy faithfully for 30 years. We have followed every law. We have paid every tax. We have fought beside you against pirates and raiders. We have shared our knowledge freely." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Some aliens nodded. Others made sounds of disagreement. Yet humanity still has no vote in this council. We cannot own property on most worlds. Our ships need special permits to travel routes that others use freely. Our merchants pay taxes that others do not. Our students are banned from the best universities. The murmurs grew louder. Korhan leaned forward in his chair, his 4 hands clenched into fists. "You speak of unfairness, human," the Koreth warrior said. His voice was deep and rough. "But you forget how quickly your species has advanced. In 100 years, you went from primitive chemical rockets to faster-than-light travel. Most species take thousands of years for such progress." "That is exactly why we must be careful," added Thaxmor. The Thaxian's tentacles waved as he spoke. "Humans are unpredictable. They change too fast. They threaten the stability we have, built over millions of years." Minho felt his jaw tighten. He had heard these same arguments countless times. Behind him, Kim Nari shifted slightly. He knew she was fighting her own anger. "We threaten nothing," Minho said firmly. "We ask only for the same rights given to every other member species. The right to vote, the right to trade freely, the right to settle new worlds, the right to defend ourselves." "Defend yourselves?" Veltar's large eyes seemed to grow even larger. "Against whom, human? Who threatens you that we do not protect you from?" The question hung in the air. Minho looked around the chamber. He saw the faces of beings from dozens of worlds. Some looked curious. Others looked hostile. A few looked afraid. "You do," Minho said quietly. The chamber exploded in noise. Aliens shouted in 100 different languages. Some stood up from their seats. Others waved arms, tentacles, or other appendages in anger. "Silence!" Veltar's voice boomed through the chamber. The noise died down, but tension remained thick in the air. "Explain yourself, human," the Vellani counselor said coldly. Minho took a deep breath. This was the moment everything had been building toward. 3 months ago, Koreth ships blockaded our colony at New Busan. They said it was for security reasons. The real reason was that our farmers were growing food more efficiently than Koreth agricultural worlds. Competition threatened their profits. That colony was built too close to a strategic shipping lane, Korhan growled. It was a security risk. The colony was built in empty space, 50 light-years from the nearest Koreth world, Minho shot back. 6 months ago, Thaxian merchants convinced the Council to ban human cargo ships from the Centauri trade route. They claimed our ships were unsafe, despite having better safety records than any Thaxian vessel. Your ships undercut our prices, Thaxmore said, not trying to hide his anger. Free market principles must have reasonable limits. And last month, Minho continued, his voice getting stronger, Villani universities refused to accept any more human students. They said we learned too quickly and made other students look bad. Veltar's blue skin darkened slightly. Educational standards must be maintained. Humans advance through their courses at unnatural speeds. It disrupts the learning environment for other species. Kim Nari stepped forward. She had remained silent, until now, but Minho could see she had reached her limit. You fear us, she said simply. Her voice was not loud, but it carried clearly through the chamber. Every excuse you make comes back to the same thing. Humans advance too quickly. Humans compete too well. Humans threaten your comfortable control. Over the galaxy. Watch your tone, soldier, Korhan warned. His red scales seemed to bristle. I will watch my tone when you watch yours, counselor, Kim Nari replied calmly. But I will not pretend that this council treats humanity fairly. More angry voices erupted from the chamber. Minho raised his hand for silence. He had one more card to play. The human government has authorized me to make one final proposal, he said loudly. The chamber gradually quieted. Humanity requests full membership in the Galactic Council within 30 standard days. Full voting rights, full trade privileges, full territorial rights, and an end to all discriminatory laws and practices against human citizens. The chamber fell completely silent. Even Veltar seemed surprised by the directness of the request. And if we refuse? The Villani counselor asked slowly. Minho looked up at the High Council. Then he turned to look around the entire chamber. Every alien delegate stared back at him. Then humanity will withdraw from all galactic affairs. We will recall our ships, our merchants, our diplomats, our soldiers, and our citizens. We will leave you to manage the galaxy without us. The silence stretched for several seconds. Then Korhan began to laugh. It was a harsh, barking sound that echoed through the chamber. Soon, other aliens joined in. The laughter grew louder and more mocking. You think this is a threat? Veltar asked through his amusement. You think the galaxy needs humanity? You are one small species among thousands. Your departure would be barely noticed. Crawl back to your little blue world, Korhan added with a sneer. See how long you survive without galactic protection and trade. Minho and Kim Nari stood quietly while the laughter continued. Finally, Minho spoke again. 30 days, he said simply. The offer expires in 30 days. As they turned to leave, Kim Nari's communication device buzzed softly. She glanced at it quickly and her face went pale. Park Jiho's message was brief, but alarming. Multiple alien fleets moving toward human territories. Recommend immediate evacuation protocols. The laughter followed them all the way to the chamber doors. Captain Lee Soman was checking cargo manifests when the alarm sounded. 3 short beeps, followed by silence, then 3 more beeps. She had never heard this alarm before in her 15 years of commanding the freighter New Soul. But every human ship captain knew what it meant. Protocol Exodus. All hands to stations, she called over the ship's communication system. Her crew moved quickly but calmly. They had trained for this moment, though none of them believed it would actually come. Soman opened her personal safe and pulled out a sealed envelope marked with red tape. Inside was a single data chip and brief instructions. She inserted the chip into her navigation computer and watched as new coordinates appeared on her screen. The destination was not Earth. It was not any known human colony. It was empty space far beyond the galactic rim. Across the galaxy, the same scene played out on thousands of human ships. Trade vessels changed course in the middle of their routes. Diplomatic shuttles left alien ports without explanation. Research ships abandoned their projects and headed for deep space. Military vessels that had been patrolling shipping lanes simply vanished from their positions. On the mining station orbiting Kepler 442, Station Chief Yoon Tae-hyun received the evacuation order with mixed feelings. His team had spent 5 years building this facility. They had turned a dead rock into one of the most productive mining operations in the sector. Now they had to leave it all behind. "Pack only what we can carry," he told his crew. "Everything else stays." "Sir," his chief engineer asked, "what about the automated systems? Should we shut them down?" Tae-hyun thought for a moment. The mining station provided rare metals to a dozen alien worlds. Without these materials, their technology would start failing within months. "Leave them running," he said finally. "But remove all the maintenance protocols. Let's see how long their equipment lasts without human engineers to fix it." In the diplomatic quarter of Thaxia Prime, Ambassador Oh Hyejin was packing her personal belongings when Thaxian security forces surrounded the human embassy. Trademaster Thaxmore himself came to speak with her. "Ambassador," the green-tentacled alien said nervously, "surely your government does not mean to follow through on this threat. Think of the trade agreements we have built together. Think of the profits we both make." Hyejin sealed her last bag and looked at the Thaxian. "I did think about them. For 30 years I thought about them. Every time your people cheated us on prices, every time you denied our merchants fair access to your markets, every time you voted against human interests in the council. But we can negotiate," Thaxmore said desperately. "There is always room for compromise in business." "The time for negotiation ended yesterday," Hyejin replied. She walked past the Thaxian guards without looking back. On the industrial world of Korath 7th, engineer Choi Woo-bin was making final adjustments to the power grid that supplied the planet's main cities. The Korath had hired him to improve their energy systems 3 years ago. What they did not know was that Woo-bin had built several special features into the design. "Computer," he said quietly, "execute maintenance protocol Omega 7. "Protocol Omega 7 confirmed," the computer replied. "Maintenance schedules extended to maximum intervals. Automatic repair systems disabled. Safety margins reduced to minimum allowable levels." The changes were subtle. The power grid would continue working normally for several months. But without regular human maintenance and oversight, small problems would gradually become bigger problems. Eventually, the entire system would start breaking down. Woo-bin smiled grimly as he packed his tools. The Korath had called humans inferior engineers in the council chambers. Soon they would discover just how inferior their own engineers really were. At the edge of the galaxy, Admiral Yoon Tae-hyun commanded the largest fleet movement in human history. Thousands of ships traveled together toward the unknown regions beyond the galactic rim. Military vessels protected civilian ships while cargo haulers carried the supplies needed to build new colonies. "Admiral," his communications officer reported, "we're receiving signals from the advanced scout teams. They've found what we're looking for." Tae-hyun studied the data streaming in from the scout ships. Solar systems rich in resources and perfect for human settlement, worlds that could be terraformed with human technology. Best of all, no signs of intelligent alien life that would complicate colonization. "Signal the fleet," he ordered. "We have new homes waiting for us." Back in civilized space, the aliens were beginning to notice humanity's absence. Veltar sat in his office on Nexus Prime, reading reports from across the galaxy. Human ships had disappeared from every major shipping route. Human merchants were no longer bidding on trade contracts. Human diplomats had abandoned their posts without explanation. "Perhaps this is for the best," he told his aide. The galaxy will be more stable without human interference. But on the industrial worlds that depended on human engineering, problems were already starting. A water treatment plant on Volani Prime began producing water with a strange taste. A climate control system on New Thaxia started making odd noises. A communication array on Koreth Central experienced intermittent failures. These were small problems, minor inconveniences. The alien engineers assured their governments that they could handle such simple issues. They did not realize that these problems were connected. They did not understand the complex web of systems that humans had built and maintained across the galaxy. Dr. Han Yuna had been working on disease prevention for the past decade. Her research centers on 12 different worlds had developed vaccines and treatments that kept millions of aliens healthy. When she received the evacuation order, she took all her research with her. "Doctor," a Volani scientist pleaded, "you cannot take this knowledge away. People will die without these medicines." "People died while your government treated us like second-class citizens," Yuna replied coldly. "Now you will have to solve these problems yourselves." The evacuation of human settlements was swift and efficient. Colonial governors like Song Min-jae had prepared for this possibility for years. Transport ships arrived at each colony with perfect timing. Essential personnel were evacuated first, followed by civilians, and finally the equipment that could be moved. What they left behind told a story. Empty cities with their lights still on. Automated factories that continued producing goods with no one to ship them. Agricultural stations that grew food with no one to harvest it. Communication networks that carried messages to empty relay. Stations. Captain Lee Soman watched the stars change as her ship traveled deeper into unexplored space. Behind them lay everything humanity had built in the galaxy. Ahead lay uncertainty and the possibility of new beginnings. "Captain," her navigation officer called, "we're approaching the rally point." Soman looked at her main screen and gasped. Thousands of human ships were already there, with more arriving every hour. In the distance, she could see the massive shapes of construction vessels beginning work on what looked like a space station. "It looks like we're not just running away," her first officer observed. "No," Soman agreed, watching the purposeful activity around them. "It looks like we're building something new." None of them knew that back in the galaxy they had left, alien governments were about to discover just how much they had depended on humanity. The humans had not just been participants in galactic civilization, they had been its maintenance crew, its problem solvers, and its most productive citizens. Now they were gone, and the galaxy was about to learn what that really meant. 6 months after the humans disappeared, Trade Master Thaxmore stared at his profit reports with growing panic. The numbers made no sense. His shipping empire, which had been the largest in the galaxy, was losing money for the first time in decades. "Explain this to me again," he said to his chief accountant, trying to keep his voice calm. "Sir, the trade routes are failing," the accountant replied nervously. "Without human cargo ships filling the gaps in our schedules, we cannot maintain efficient delivery times. Our costs have increased by 40%, but our prices remain the same due to competition." Thaxamore's tentacles writhed in frustration. "Then raise our prices." "We tried, sir. But the Koreth and Volani are offering the same services at lower costs. They are losing money too, but they can afford it longer than we can." What none of them understood was that the entire galactic shipping system had been designed around human efficiency. Song Min-jae had spent 15 years as a logistics coordinator, creating shipping schedules that maximized every ship's cargo capacity and minimized travel time. The aliens had always assumed their own computers were managing these complex calculations. In reality, human analysts had been doing the real work behind the scenes. Now ships sat half-empty in spaceports because no one knew how to optimize their loading. Trade routes that once moved goods smoothly across the galaxy now suffered constant delays and bottlenecks. The aliens were trying to solve these problems with the same old methods that had been inefficient before humans arrived. On Volani Prime, Counselor Velnas was facing his own crisis. The planet's main agricultural region was experiencing crop failures on a scale not seen in centuries. The automated farming systems were working perfectly, but the crops were dying anyway. "What do our agricultural experts say?" Velnas asked his science advisor. "They are confused, sir. The soil analysis shows proper nutrients. The weather patterns are normal. The irrigation systems are functioning correctly, but the crops continue to fail." What they did not know was that human botanist Bei Junho had been quietly managing their agricultural systems for the past 8 years. He had identified a slow-developing soil bacteria that would eventually destroy crop yields. His solution had been to introduce helpful microorganisms that kept the harmful bacteria in check. The treatment needed to be renewed every 6 months. It had been 7 months since the last treatment. The bacteria were now spreading through the soil of 12 agricultural worlds. Within another month, food shortages would begin. Within 6 months, some planets would face famine. But the most serious problems were appearing on the industrial worlds. The Koreth had always prided themselves on their military technology. Their weapons were the finest in the galaxy, their ships the most powerful. What they had not realized was how much human innovation had improved their designs. General Korthak stood in his command center, watching his fleet's performance reports with growing anger. "How can our best warships be losing battles against common pirates?" he roared. His chief engineer shifted nervously. "Sir, our weapons systems are experiencing efficiency drops across all platforms. Our targeting computers are less accurate. Our energy output is decreasing. Our shield generators are overheating." "Then fix them." "We are trying, sir. But the human engineers took all their technical documentation when they left. We are having to rediscover solutions to problems we did not know existed." The truth was worse than they realized. Human engineers had not just maintained Koreth military systems. They had quietly redesigned them from the ground up. Cooling systems that prevented overheating, targeting algorithms that improved accuracy, power management systems that increased weapon output. All of this knowledge had walked out the door with the humans. Now Koreth ships were operating at perhaps 60% of their former capability. Pirates with older but better-maintained ships were running circles around them. On the medical stations throughout the galaxy, doctors were facing their own nightmare. Dr. Han Yuna had been working with alien medical teams for over a decade, developing treatments for diseases that affected multiple species. Her research centers had been producing medicines that prevented several deadly plagues from spreading. The last batch of these medicines had been distributed 5 months ago. They were designed to last 6 months in the patient's system before needing renewal. "Dr. Velhai," a medical assistant called urgently, "we are seeing the first cases again." The Volani doctor looked at the patient reports with growing dread. The crimson fever was returning. This disease had once killed millions of aliens across dozens of worlds. Dr. Yuna's treatments had eliminated it as a threat, but now with the medicine wearing off and no new supplies being produced, it was coming back. "Contact the other medical stations," Dr. Velhai ordered. "Find out if they have any remaining supplies of Dr. Yuna's treatments." The response was the same from every station. Supplies exhausted, no knowledge of how to produce more, patients beginning to show symptoms. High Counselor Veltar sat in an emergency session with the other council members. Reports of failures were coming in from across the galaxy. Trade disruptions, military defeats, crop failures, disease outbreaks, infrastructure breakdowns. At first, these had seemed like separate problems. Now, a pattern was becoming clear. How many of these problems can be traced to missing human expertise? He asked his staff. The answer came back after 3 days of investigation. 78%. "This is impossible," Korhan protested. Humans are a minor species. They cannot have been this important to galactic civilization. But the evidence was overwhelming. Humans had been involved in virtually every aspect of galactic society. Not as leaders or decision-makers, but as the skilled workers who made everything function properly. They had been the engineers who maintained the systems, the doctors who prevented the plagues, the analysts who optimized the trade routes, the researchers who solved the technical problems. The aliens had seen themselves as the masters of the galaxy, with humans as useful servants. In reality, the humans had been the foundation that everything else was built on. And now that foundation was gone. Jindaho floated in his stealth ship at the edge of Thaxian space, monitoring their communications. His job was to gather intelligence on how the aliens were reacting to humanity's absence. What he was hearing amazed him. "Priority message to human command," he transmitted using encrypted channels. "Alien governments are beginning to panic, trade systems failing, military capabilities declining, medical crises developing. They are starting to realize the scope of their dependence on human expertise." The response came back quickly from Admiral Yoon Tae-hyun. "Continue monitoring. Report any signs of aggressive action against remaining human interests." But there were no aggressive actions. The aliens were too busy trying to hold their civilization together to think about revenge. They were discovering that humanity's departure had not been an empty threat. It had been the removal of the skilled workforce that kept the galaxy running. On distant worlds beyond the galactic rim, humanity was building something new. Terraforming machines worked around the clock to prepare new planets for colonization. Shipyards constructed vessels using designs the aliens had never seen. Research stations developed technologies that made their old galactic neighbors look primitive. The humans had not fled in defeat. They had shed the constraints that had been holding them back. Free from alien interference and discrimination, human innovation was advancing at a pace that amazed even their own scientists. Back in the galaxy they had left behind, the first minor alien species was facing extinction. The Zephyrians had depended entirely on human-maintained medical stations to treat a genetic condition that affected their entire population. With the humans gone and their equipment failing, the Zephyrian population was beginning to die. It was the first casualty of the aliens' decision to drive humanity away. It would not be the last. 2 years after humanity's departure, the Galactic Council faced the worst crisis in its million-year history. High Counselor Veltar stood before an emergency assembly, his blue skin pale with stress. The chamber that had once mocked humanity now buzzed with desperate voices. "The situation reports," Veltar began, his normally commanding voice shaking slightly. 17 minor species have gone extinct due to system failures. The Korath military has suffered 12 major defeats against pirates using 100-year-old technology. Thaxian trade revenues have dropped by 73%. Medical stations across 42 worlds report plague outbreaks that we cannot control. The chamber erupted in panicked voices. Species that had once competed for dominance now begged each other for help. The proud Korath requested aid from the merchant Thaxians. The aristocratic Vellani asked for assistance from species they had previously ignored. "We need solutions," Korhan growled. His forearms spread wide in frustration. "Our greatest military minds cannot figure out why our weapons are failing. Our best engineers cannot maintain systems that humans built. Our brightest doctors cannot reproduce medicines that human researchers created." "Perhaps," suggested a voice from the upper chambers, "we should try to contact the humans." The chamber fell silent. The suggestion came from Ambassador Laxton of the Hegemony, one of the smaller council species. His people had always maintained friendlier relations with humanity. "Contact them for what purpose?" Thaxmore asked bitterly. "To beg them to return? To admit that we were wrong?" "If necessary, yes," Laxton replied simply. "Pride is a luxury we can no longer afford." Veltar considered this. The Vellani had intercepted long-range signals suggesting that humans had established colonies beyond the galactic rim. But every Attempt to send messages had failed. The humans were either not receiving their communications or choosing not to respond. Very well, Veltar decided. Prepare deep space reconnaissance missions. Find the humans. Learn what they are doing out there. 3 weeks later, Commander Lim Seojin was conducting routine patrols at the edge of human space when his sensors detected an approaching vessel. It was Koreth design, but heavily modified with long-range equipment. A reconnaissance ship. Unknown. Vessel, Seojin transmitted. You are entering restricted space. State your purpose. The response came in heavily accented Standard Galactic. This is Koreth Deep Scout Honor's Edge. We seek communication with human authorities. We come with peaceful intentions. Seojin almost laughed. 2 years ago, this same ship type had been blockading human colonies. Now they were asking politely for meetings. Follow my ship, Seojin instructed. Maintain distance and make no sudden movements. You will be escorted to a designated contact point. What the Koreth crew saw during their escort shocked them into silence. The empty space beyond the galactic rim was no longer empty. Massive structures floated in the void, some larger than entire cities. Shipyards stretched for hundreds of kilometers, building vessels of designs the aliens had never imagined. Most impressive were the planets themselves. Worlds that had been barren rocks 2 years ago now showed signs of active terraforming. Atmospheric. Processors the size of mountains pumped breathable air into thin atmospheres. Continent-sized machines reshaped planetary surfaces. Orbital mirrors reflected sunlight to warm frozen worlds. By the ancestors, whispered the Koreth navigator. What have they built? The escort led them to a communication station that appeared to have been constructed specifically for alien contact. It was functional, but not welcoming. The humans clearly had no desire to make their former oppressors comfortable. Kim Do-young appeared on their main screen. The former terraforming specialist now wore the uniform of something called the Human Colonial Authority. His expression was politely neutral. Commander Korvex, Do-young said, reading from his computer. Your ship carried out 3 separate blockades of human colonies before our departure. Your crew participated in the harassment of human merchants. You personally voted to support restrictions on human trade rights. Korvex shifted uncomfortably. That was different time. Circumstances have changed. Indeed they have, Do-young agreed. What do you want? The Galactic Council wishes to open communications with human leadership. We have problems that human expertise might help resolve. Problems. Do-young's tone remained neutral, but something cold flickered in his eyes. You mean the infrastructure failures? The medical crises? The military defeats? The trade disruptions? You know about these? We monitor all galactic communications, Do-young replied simply. We know exactly what is happening in the space we left behind. Korvex leaned forward desperately. Then you know how serious the situation has become. Entire species are dying. Our civilization is collapsing. And what does that have to do with us? The question hung in the air. Korvex struggled to find an answer that did not sound like begging. We made mistakes, he said finally. Perhaps we judged humanity too harshly. Perhaps we can find a way to work together again. Do-young was quiet for several seconds. Commander, your people spent 30 years treating humans like dangerous animals that needed to be contained. You denied us basic rights. You restricted our freedom. You mocked our requests for equality. And now when your systems are failing, you come to us asking for help. I understand your anger, Korvex said quietly. Do you? Do-young asked. Do you understand that while you were blockading our colonies, we were designing terraforming systems that could transform dead worlds in months instead of centuries? Do you understand that while you were restricting our trade, we were developing manufacturing techniques that could build entire cities in weeks? Do you understand that while you were denying us representation, we were solving scientific problems that your greatest minds could not even comprehend? The Koreth commander stared at the human on his screen. We did not know. Of course, you did not know, Do-young replied. You were too busy being afraid of us to actually learn what we were capable of. Behind Korvex, his crew was reviewing the sensor data from their journey through human space. What they were seeing defied belief. Energy readings that exceeded anything in galactic civilization, construction on a scale that suggested human population had grown dramatically, technology that made their most advanced systems look primitive. How? Many humans are there now? Korvex asked quietly. More than when we left your galaxy, Do-young answered. We have found other species out here. Species with technology and knowledge that make our old galactic neighbors seem backward. We have formed alliances that benefit all parties involved. This was the aliens' greatest fear realized. Humanity had not just survived their exile. They had found better partners. They had joined a larger community that the Galactic Council did not even know existed. What do you want from us? Korvex asked desperately. Nothing, Do-young replied simply. We want absolutely nothing from you. The communication ended. Korvex sat in his command chair, staring at the blank screen. Around him, his crew worked, quietly, processing the terrible implications of what they had discovered. Humanity had not just left the galaxy. They had found a better galaxy. They had accessed levels of technology and knowledge that the Council species could never hope to achieve. They had become part of something larger and more advanced than the civilization that had rejected them. The return journey to Council space took 3 weeks. When Korvex delivered his report to the emergency assembly, the chamber fell silent. The proud species that had once dismissed humanity as primitives now faced the reality that they were the primitives. They do not need us, Veltar said slowly after hearing the complete report. They have found better allies, more advanced technology, greater opportunities. And they will never forgive us, added Thaxmore, his tentacles drooping with defeat. Indeed, the upper chambers, Ambassador Laxton spoke the words that everyone was thinking. We have made the greatest mistake in galactic history. We cast out the one species that could have led us to greatness. And now we must face the consequences alone. Outside, in the vast spaces beyond the galactic rim, human ships continued their expansion into the greater universe, leaving their former neighbors to struggle with the civilization they could no longer maintain. 5 years after humanity's departure, space around Nexus Prime suddenly filled with impossible shadows. The massive human fleet appeared without warning, their ships materializing out of faster-than-light travel with perfect precision. But these were not the vessels that had left the galaxy years ago. Admiral Ryu Seong-hoon stood on the bridge of the flagship Incheon, watching the alien space station grow larger on his main screen. His ship was 10 kilometers long and 3 kilometers wide, dwarfing even the largest Council dreadnoughts. Around him, hundreds of similar vessels maintained perfect formation, their dark hulls reflecting starlight like polished mirrors. Admiral, his communications officer reported, we are receiving thousands of emergency transmissions from the station and surrounding ships. They want to know who we are and what we want. Let them wonder, Seong-hoon replied calmly. Hold position. Maintain silence. Beside him, Director Jang Minji monitored alien communications traffic. Her screens showed panic spreading through the galactic communication networks. Alien commanders were scrambling to identify the massive fleet that had appeared at their most important station. They are trying to scan us, reported the sensor officer. Their scanners cannot penetrate our hull shielding. Of course they cannot, Seong-hoon said with quiet satisfaction. Let them see what we want them to see. What the aliens could see was terrifying enough. The human ships used technology that defied everything they understood about physics. No engine signatures, no heat emissions, no radiation traces that their sensors could identify. The vessels seemed to exist in a state of controlled impossibility. On Nexus Prime, emergency alarms wailed throughout the station. High Counselor Veltar rushed to the command center, his blue skin pale with fear. Through the massive observation windows, he could see the human fleet hanging in space like a dark constellation. How many ships? He demanded. We count at least 800 primary vessels, his aide reported with a trembling voice. But our sensors detect additional ships that we cannot fully identify. The total number may be several thousand. Veltar stared at the fleet in disbelief. When humanity had left, their entire military had consisted of perhaps 200 ships. Now they had returned with a force that could destroy every military installation in Council space. "Sir," the communications officer called urgently, "we are detecting more fleets. Long-range sensors show human vessels positioned throughout the galaxy. They are everywhere." The truth was even more overwhelming than the aliens realized. Humanity had not sent one fleet to intimidate their former oppressors. They had positioned dozens of fleets at every major alien world, space station, and military base. In a single coordinated movement, they had surrounded the entire galactic civilization. "Are they responding to our communications?" Veltar asked, desperately. "No, sir. They are not acknowledging any of our transmissions." On the Inshan, Admiral Seong-hoon was perfectly aware of the frantic alien communications. He was choosing to ignore them. This was not a negotiation or a diplomatic mission. This was a demonstration. "Admiral," Director Jang reported, "long range. Communications confirm that all fleets are in position. Operation Homecoming is ready to proceed." "Signal Supreme Commander Im," Seong-hoon ordered. The response came immediately from the command ship in the outer system. Supreme Commander Im Dong-yun appeared on the main screen, his expression calm but implacable. Behind him, the bridge of his ship hummed with quiet efficiency. "All fleets report ready, Admiral," Im said simply. "Shall we proceed?" Begin Phase 1. Across the galaxy, human fleets began moving simultaneously. Not attacking, but repositioning themselves closer to alien worlds. The message was unmistakable. Every planet, every station, every ship in Council space was now within range of human weapons, but the humans did not fire. They simply waited. On Thaxia Prime, Trademaster Thaxmore watched in horror as human ships appeared in orbit around his homeworld. His once powerful merchant fleet looked like toys compared to the massive vessels that now dominated his sky. "Contact them," he ordered frantically. "Offer them anything they want, trade agreements, exclusive contracts, whatever they demand." But the humans were not interested in trade. They were demonstrating that trade was no longer necessary. They had found better partners among the civilizations beyond the galactic rim. On Koreth Central, General Korthak mobilized every available warship to defend his world. His proudest dreadnoughts, the ones that had once blockaded human colonies, now looked pathetic compared to the human vessels that hung motionless above his planet. "Fire on them," he ordered desperately. "Show them that we will not surrender without a fight." "Sir," his tactical officer replied nervously, "our weapons cannot lock onto their ships. Their technology is beyond our understanding." Korthak realized, with growing dread, that this was not a battle he could win. This was not even a battle he could fight. After 3 days of silence, the humans finally responded to alien communications. But the message did not come from the fleets. It came from a transmission beyond the galactic rim, from Supreme Commander Im Dong-yun himself. Im appeared on every screen in Council space simultaneously. His image was broadcast to every alien world, every space station, every ship. His voice carried the authority of a civilization that had grown far beyond what the aliens could imagine. "Citizens of the former Galactic Council," he began, his tone calm and formal. 5 years ago, you declared humanity a threat to galactic security. You were correct. The words sent chills through every alien who heard them. You believed that by driving us away, you could contain that threat. You were wrong. You did not contain us. You freed us from the limitations you had imposed. You allowed us to reach our true potential. On Nexus Prime, Veltar listened with growing horror as Im continued. We have returned not as supplicants seeking acceptance, but as the dominant force in this region of space. We have alliances with civilizations you never knew existed. We have technology you cannot comprehend. We have resources you cannot imagine. The transmission paused, allowing the implications to sink in. You may wonder why we have not destroyed you. The answer is simple. You are no longer important enough to destroy. You have become irrelevant. Ambassador Park Yuri appeared beside Im on the screen. She had been a junior diplomat when humanity left. Now she spoke with the authority of humanity's senior representative. The galaxy you once controlled is dying, she said simply. Your trade routes are failing. Your military is ineffective. Your technology is obsolete. Your civilizations are collapsing. This is not our doing. This is the natural result of your own incompetence. But we offer you a choice, Im continued. You may continue your decline in isolation, clinging to the remnants of your former power, or you may accept the new reality and learn your place in the greater universe that humanity now helps to govern. The transmission ended, leaving the aliens in stunned silence. On his flagship, Admiral Seong-hoon received new orders from Supreme Command. The demonstration was complete. Phase 2 would begin immediately. Human fleets began departing from alien space as suddenly as they had arrived, but they did not return to the galactic rim. Instead, they took positions throughout the galaxy, establishing permanent bases on uninhabited worlds, claiming the best resources, and setting up their own trade networks. The message was clear. The galaxy no longer belonged to the Council species. It belonged to humanity and their new allies. The aliens could exist within it, but only as junior partners in a civilization they no longer controlled. High Counselor Veltar sat alone in his office, staring out at the stars. The galaxy that had once bowed to Vellani authority now answered. To human command, the species that had once mocked humanity now lived at human sufferance. The irony was perfect and terrible. In trying to prevent humanity from becoming a threat, the aliens had created exactly what they feared most. A human empire that spanned not just their galaxy, but reached into the greater universe beyond. And humanity, having learned the price of seeking acceptance from those who would never grant it, had stopped asking for permission to be great.